Hello and welcome to Author Hour. I'm your host, Richard Lyntton, author of North Korea Deception, Hyde Park Deception, and Leningrad Deception. My guest today is F. Joseph Merlino, president of the 21st Century Partnership for STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Education, a non-profit research and action organization located in Wayne, Pennsylvania, and in Cairo, Egypt. For the past 35 years, he has served as principal investigator or director of many National Science Foundation, U.S. Department of Education, and U.S. Agency for International Development projects impacting thousands of secondary math and science teachers and hundreds of schools. For the past 12 years, he oversaw the development of a new integrated curriculum for 21 new model STEM high schools based on Egypt's 11 grand challenges. In addition, he is currently directing a new STEM teacher preparation program with 180 new courses for 5 large Egyptian universities. Joe has a BA in psychology from the University of Rochester and an MA in education from Arcadia University. He did doctoral studies in cognitive developmental psychology at Catholic University. He and his colleague Dr. Deborah Pomeroy have just written this new book based on their decades of experience directing education reform projects. The book is called New Era, New Urgency, The Case for Repurposing Education, published by Lexington Books. Welcome, Joe. Amazing. Just amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. So I have been, I'm not an academic and, I don't pretend to be, but I feel like this book, even though it's an academic book, yes, it should be in every parent's library. It should be in your school library, at high school or university. Who is this book for, Joe?
It's for the people you just mentioned.
Okay.
We wanted to write it so that it would be scholarly and it would hold up to criticism or by academic types, yeah, but we wrote it in a way that we hope would be very readable as a narrative for parents and policymakers, yep, et cetera. Yeah.
I mean, I think, as a parent, I've got 2 boys in college, and as the years go by, especially because I'm from England and I live in America, you have all these thoughts, well, is it worth it? Is it BS? Like, I noticed there's one chapter or one segment in the book that you talk about prestige and, what that means, and the fact that French, the word for prestige is deceit. And it's like, yeah, it's a prestigious college, so what? Why? That's one of the things many things that stood out. But talk to me a little bit about like that whole idea of prestige and why that's important or not important. And I know it's like 3/4 of the way through the book, but just let's just start there.
So if you think that high school became a big thing in the United States in the early 1900s, or the early part of the 20th century. But before, very few people actually went to college.
Right.
So high school had a purpose sort of at the end. I mean, you didn't have an idea that you would go to college. And then in the second half of the 20th century, college became more important. And so now you got a situation where the purpose of high school is to prepare you for college.
Right.
And that's become the mantra, college and career success. Right. Well, what if you didn't think about college? What should high school, what should K-12 be if college was not on the map? So the question is, what is the purpose of high school if you don't have college? And if you do have college, what is the purpose of college? Most kids, if you ask them, according to surveys, will say, well, I go to college because I want a better job. But if you talk to college presidents and faculty members, they have a very different interpretation of college, which is to improve yourself, to widen your horizons, to be liberal in your thinking. I don't mean politically, I mean just open to experience, to know something of the world, and to have a moral purpose to it. Very different than, so if you're going to college, that's fine, but you should go because you have a definite reason for going.
Right.
Not just because you think it's going to give you a better job, because actually 2/5 of all the college graduates, if you graduate, are working in occupations that do not require a college degree.
Wow. And it's funny you should say it, because I have this sort of background thought as my two boys made their way through high school and they're now at college. And I kept saying to myself, well, it's okay if you're going to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a scientist. But like, I feel like, you know, if my son's going to be doing music production, you know, does he really need to go to college kind of thing? But anyway, I wanted to take a step back. What is this book about and why did you write it?
Okay, the book is about the trajectory of our country from its early foundation to now, and the changes that have occurred in this country over 5 lifetimes.
And can you just explain what you mean by that? Because I wasn't sure. I did want to ask. What, in the contents, it says, you know, first lifetime. What do you mean by the lifetime thing?
So, if you think about your life, or if you talk about an older person's life, they've been through a lot of changes, right? Or they've seen a lot of changes. But every lifetime has seen changes.
Okay.
Right? Every person's lifetime. So I wanted to talk about, well, what is the purpose of education? So I wanted to go back to the earliest time that was a very distinct purpose. So I had to tell that story.
Right.
And so how do you tell the story? So I told the story in terms of a lifetime.
Okay.
So the first lifetime, you know, the Puritans coming over and the changes that they have, what happened to them. And the idea of the book was the changes that have occurred during a lifetime propel changes in the purposes of education.
Okay.
So, may I?
Yeah.
Okay. So the very first purpose, and I trace this to England, was why the Puritans came over. Right? They wanted to form a new Israel.
Okay.
And so their idea of education was to read the Bible in English, to have every accessible. But they also wanted to form a community that were Calvinists.
Yep.
So it was the elect, so to speak. And that was fine but as more people came over, you had different religious sects.
Right. Yeah.
And they were arguing with one another. So when William Penn came over from Philadelphia in the Quakers, he wanted to establish a school where religious tolerance was the purpose and separation of church and state, because the Puritans did not separate church and state. So each phase of a lifetime and the changes, different things emerged. And so that was an example.
And there are 5 lifetimes.
There are 5 lifetimes, and now we're emerging into the 6th lifetime.
So just so this is just one part of the book, right? I think this is just part 1.
Yes.
So just to be clear, this is why it's so fascinating. And I was truly, truly blown away by this book. So Joe writes about these 5 lifetimes in historical terms and education. So, and again, I want to move on because there's so much to get to. So that's fascinating in itself. So again, amazing stuff. So then what's part 2?
So by the way, I learned a lot writing part 1.
I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, so part 2 says, okay, you have these purposes, but there's other things going on in this country that are sort of underneath the surface. They are sort of the spirit of the country. Yeah. And there's good spirits and bad spirits. And so the idea is, in part 2, we talk about 4 spirits, and I don't want to get too metaphysical, but it's, as an educator, I confront it. All right, so the first thing is extreme wealth inequality and how that's affected education. The second one is nativism, and we see nativism right today, right? The immigrants and the immigrants,
them and us.
Yes, and that's been the case since Ben Franklin, who was talked about the Germans coming over. And he talked about them in very disparaging ways. The Irish, the Italians. So there has been this nativist feeling. In fact, in the know-nothings, echo what is happening right today. Third one is white supremacy, which we talk about here is not so much black and white, and there is that, but white and red. And that starts at the doctrine of discovery, which gives
white in red as in red Indian?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it gives, I mean, there was in the U.S., there was about 800 Indian tribes, about 18 million, about 100 million in the Americas. So when Europeans discovered this country, that was a problem.
Right.
So what was the supremacy? The supremacy began with that idea. And the fourth spirit is anti-intellectualism, or using religion to dispute the facts of science. So you don't listen to evidence because you've already have your opinion.
Right.
So those things course through the purposes that we as educators have to confront.
Yeah. I mean, it's so troubling. I feel like when I first came to this country 20 years ago, you would have intellectual arguments and facts were facts, right? And
Yes.
now, as you talk about in the book as well, because so much has changed and social media and all these people can just put out non-facts, we're just in such a mess. I mean, before we go on to the next part, I mean, let's just take that one thing. I mean, you as an educator, or I don't know how much you talk about it in the book specifically, but how do you teach people to, what is a fact and what is a non-fact? Do you cover that much in the book?
Yes. So what we talk about, and particularly in chapter 13, is that children have misconceptions of the world. They have natural misconceptions of the world. They feel, for example, that the moon follows them. Not understanding that the moon cannot simultaneously follow everyone.
Yeah.
So you have these egocentrisms, these misconceptions, and they just occur. So in every bit of learning, there is a point where you're vulnerable. Because you're opening yourself up to the possibility that you've been mistaken, or that there's another approach or another idea. And this is true even of researchers and university people. They don't want to give up their ideas, what they have, despite the evidence. So this point of vulnerability you have to be careful about it. You can't beat someone over the head and say, I'm right, you're wrong, because they're going to be defensive. So part of changing this is to, particularly in education, is to have a safe space where you can have these conversations without it being, you have to give time for people to change their mind, and you have to be loving when you do it.
Only way to do it.
Only way to do it. Yeah. You can't beat them over the head or say, I'm going to kill you unless you agree with me.
Right. So, which brings me on to part 3, which is explores the illusions of educational reform that have overpromised college and career success, created an idolatry of math test scores, conflated memorization of facts with conceptual understanding, and confused multiple layers of policy agendas with progress. So you start to get into it there. Tell us about part 3.
So there's 4 chapters in part 3, and the thing about this book is that Deborah and I have lived this.
Right.
All right, we've confronted this, and in one of the chapters I talk about the math wars.
Yeah.
They're still going on. And I taught math. I taught algebra, and I taught high school math, and I've done a lot with teachers, and I like math.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that don't.
Yeah.
But the thing is, math has become, as an example, overrated.
Okay.
Algebra has become overrated. It's not to say it's not important. I would say there's many other forms of math that you can teach. There's math and music, for example, that you can teach. There's geometry. There's all kinds of math you can teach. That to make this sort of the sine qua non of whether or not you're a good student is destructive of both mathematics education and also the education of the student. So the illusion is that this is the only measure of something that's worthwhile.
Right.
Because it's being used for other purposes. It's to be used for ranking, to go to college, to judge whether or not school is good, and it distorts it. So this is what I'm talking about.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So then how do you, and maybe you can talk about Bosnia, for example, so then you have, I mean, this, you've done so many different things and been involved in so many different projects, but you have compiled, created a way of sort of starting from the ground up, correct me if I'm wrong.
Right.
And you did that, for one example, you did it, you've done it in Egypt, but you've done it in Bosnia-Herzegovina. I was a United Nations military observer during the war in Bosnia, so that's kind of very interesting for me to hear about. Why don't you tell us a little bit about overall how you do this seemingly mammoth task of re-educating education, as it were, but you actually did it in Bosnia, and why Bosnia and Herzegovina?
A lot of what's happened to me over my lifetime in my career has been serendipity. Egypt was that way. So was Bosnia.
Okay.
So people just came to me
Wow.
when I was ready. But it starts with first your vision and your aspiration for what you want in your country,
Okay.
or what you want in your neighborhood. It's not about the purpose of education. It's about the purpose of your community. It starts there.
Wow.
So in Bosnia, for example, as you well know, they had a terrible war. And so we were in a post-conflict environment. And for the Bosnians, you know, things were divided between the Croats and the Bosniaks and so on.
Yeah.
Their aspiration was for the country to be unified and have peace. But they realized that there was such division geographically. One side of the bridge and versus the other side of the bridge, but that's also in the case of schools, where the schools had a line in the middle of the hallway and one side versus the other side.
You mean a literal line?
Yes.
So what, for boys and girls?
No, for the different.
Did?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Isn't that amazing?
Also, 60% of the kids wanted to leave, and because of the unemployment, and go to Europe. So they wanted to reimagine education in a way that would be. So what they arrived at was the idea, education for a knowledge-based economy.
Education for knowledge-based economy. Okay.
All right. So that, and the idea of a knowledge.
And you're helping them do this.
That's what we did.
Okay. That's why you went there.
Yeah, that's why we went there. And so we had a team of people from the U.S. because we were doing this in Egypt, but they had a different vision than Egypt. They had a different purpose because they had a different vision of what they wanted in their country. So we helped university professors along with Save the Children to design a curriculum, integrated curriculum that was based upon 10 knowledge-based sectors, economic sectors, KBEs. And so we changed the curriculum to focus on how is knowledge used in agriculture, how is knowledge used in aircraft manufacturing.
Let me just start. So your team arrives in Sarajevo, and so where do you're starting at university level or high school level or government people?
We had government people, university people, mostly, and they were involved in creating the curriculum. What we did was guide them to how to do it because we just did it in Egypt.
Wow!
And so it started with what's your vision for your country?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what's your purpose then of education follows from that vision. And in this case, they defined their purpose to be, they wanted peace, they wanted kids to be able to work regardless of geography.
Right.
So a knowledge-based economy, you can stay at home and work.
Okay.
Okay. So it wouldn't prevent that. It would be a way for you to stay here. So what they did, we blank slate, start fresh. You want 10 sectors of the knowledge-based economy. Yep. So we had 10 sectors. We had all the subjects across, and we said, what do you need to know if you want a knowledge-based economy, let's say in biotechnology, which was an industry? What do you need to know? And then what do you need to know for this sector and for that sector? So we had a matrix. And then we created from the ground up the sequence of courses and studies.
And when you say from ground up, from like early age?
Yeah, it was K to 13.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so we guided the university people. We had 9 university people from 3 universities to do that.
And when you say we, is this you, F. Joseph Merlino, and Deborah Pomeroy, your organization? What's your organization called again? Sorry,
the 21 Pieces.
Yeah, is that the organization that has created this?
We co-created it with them, so we guided them in the process. We had about 8 or 9 people from our organization in different subject matters. Helped them do it. We went over there. We guided them through the process and. Back and forth, and we developed a curriculum application for them so they could put all this stuff in there. Yeah, and we had.
And you didn't. I don't think you mentioned. How did you get to Bosnia? Like, how on earth did you get to Bosnia for this particular project? You said serendipity. So how did that actually come about? Just curious.
Save the Children had this grant from the U.S. Agency for International Development. They contacted us initially, and they said, can you help us? And we said, yes. They said, okay, we'll get back to you. They got someone else. It didn't work out. A year later, they came back to us, and they said, "Can you help us?" And I said, "Sure."
Amazing.
So we just had completed basically the first 5 years of our Egypt project. And so we knew that we had a product. We knew that we knew that the process would work.
Amazing. Amazing.
So we went over and they said, here's what we did. It's an 18-step process to develop this curriculum from the ground up. And we took them through it.
How long does it take?
It's a couple of years.
A couple of years.
Yeah.
And then the Egypt thing.
Oh, by the way, excuse me.
Yeah, go on.
There was a team in Sarajevo that we worked with, from Bosnia, and so I don't want to give us all the credit.
Yeah.
They were leading the team. We were advising them as to what the process was.
And did they all speak like fluent English?
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes. Same thing with Egypt. It's all done in English.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, what I keep saying amazing because like when I was in Sarajevo, literally there were 1,500 shells a day landing in Sarajevo. So it's like, and I've often wondered, like, I wonder how Bosnia's doing. I wonder how, if they've ironed out the tensions now. So it's just incredible to think that this kind of thing has been happening in recent years. And how did the Egypt thing come about? And just tell us again, because there's extraordinary amounts of, what is it, several hundred programs, and you tell me, better for you to tell me, how did you get to Egypt, and what have you managed to do in Egypt?
Well, actually, it's a great story. So we had started to write this book 14 years ago.
Wow.
And because we had other projects. And one of the big lessons learned as we started to write this book was that you had to have a purpose. Right. You have to be very intentional about, because I would, for example, ask math teachers, say, why are you teaching algebra?
Okay.
And they said, well, we need it for algebra 2. I said, why are you teaching algebra 2? Need it for trigonometry.
Right.
Well, why trigonometry? Need it for the SAT. I said, there's no trigonometry on the SAT.
Wow.
So
crazy.
They and the students did not really have a good intentionality, and we saw that was really the key, is to have that. Yeah. So as we were writing the part 1 of that book, we got a call from the International Visitor Center in August of 2011.
Yeah.
This is right after the Egyptian Revolution that you saw on CNN, right? All the chaos going on. Yeah. They said, listen, we have the Minister of Education of Egypt and a delegation coming to Philadelphia. They are interested in STEM schools, because they want to change their education system. It's too rigid. They have these exams that everything is dependent on these exams.
So very briefly, what is a STEM school for people who don't know?
Okay. There are STEM schools and then there are STEM schools. If you have a STEM school but there's no purpose to the STEM school, then it's really not a STEM school. Okay. It's just a name. To be a STEM school, you have to have a driving purpose to the STEM, because the idea of STEM, math, science, technology, is that they're all work together.
Okay.
The world is an integrated world.
Yeah.
Right? The cosmos is integrated. Yeah. That's not separate into biology and chemistry. Yeah. But if you want to create and have a window into that world, you need a way to integrate all of these subjects, and that's where your purpose is. Okay, so that's the first thing. So when they came over, they didn't know really what STEM was.
Right.
And so we showed them around Philadelphia, and the minister says, I just have to tell you this real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
we have time.
So he's in my office, right? And we have, and we do a little dog and pony show about the work that we've been doing. And we had a lot of people in the office showing off. So he says, we want to start these schools. I said, fine. Do you have a curriculum? He says, no. I said, have you trained your teachers? He says, no. Have you bought any materials? He says, no. In fact, we just fired the principal. I said, well, when are you opening up your school? He said, next month. This is in August, and he was opening the school in September. It was an all-boys school. So long story short, he invited us over there, and USAID paid for us, U.S. Agency of International Development paid for a short-term contract to just help him out. Later, that mushroomed into a $25 million project where we were part of the technical team to develop these curriculums. So what the minister did was to give us carte blanche to say, we're going to start this from dust up.
Yep.
Help us design a curriculum. I said, well, what's your purpose? And they said, to solve Egypt's grandest challenges. I said, okay.
11, right?
11 grand challenges, and we had what we call design studios, 60 Egyptians. We put them in a room for 3 days.
Wow.
We said, okay, here are all your grand challenges. Here is all your subjects. Tell me, why do you need physics?
Yeah.
Well, we need physics for solar energy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about physics?
Yeah.
So after they gathered all this data, Deborah went back and with a team created this integrated curriculum.
Yeah.
And that's what we're using. And
Nice.
these kids are winning international competitions like never before.
Joe, we're getting close. We've only got 5 minutes left, but I want to come. So that was like the bird's eye view. I want to come whiz down back to Radnor Township.
Yes.
Like what we've talked about. How does that then? Do you envisage doing the same in America, or is America way ahead? Like how does it like? Is it way behind? That's the whole point.
It's behind.
Right. So you, and again, I'm trying to picture me as a parent in Radnor Township. So you're saying from what I gleaned is that the restructuring, as it were, of education starts with these meetings of parents and local people to decide what they want, not just in the country, but specifically in their community.
Exactly. So I worked in Radnor. We had projects in Radnor. In fact, one of the Radnor superintendents was on my staff when he retired.
What did he say when you retired?
He says, I'm a recovering superintendent. And it's a tough job. It really is. And I've worked in Haverford and a lot of the schools around here we worked in. If the measure of your success in a school is getting to college, then Radnor is very successful. Mm-hmm. I don't know about completing college. Mm-hmm. We looked at one district nearby, and only 30% of their kids finished. It was like a Radnor. I can't mention the name, but we looked at how they. But does that satisfy the community needs? Is that your aspirations? We have so many things going on, such a new era these days. The demographics are changing. What kind of society we want to live in? Are we really preparing our kids? Are the graduates of Radnor having a moral sense of their obligation to the community and to the country because of the privilege of where they're going? Do they have that? That's why it's a public education, because there's a moral and social reason for it.
Yeah. Wow.
So that kind of thing needs discussion.
And are you involved in like getting those conversations going now, today, this year, or is this like something you would like to do?
I would like to do it. That's why I'm here.
Right.
Talking to you as in Wayne.
I mean, I think
you have that political will to do it.
Yeah, right. Very briefly, in 1 minute, Joe, what was it like writing this book with Deborah, and how did you do it? Were you back and forth? Did you say, I'm going to write this chapter, I'm going to write this chapter?
The book went through different, as I mentioned, it took us 14 years to write it, and I went through different iterations for it. And why it took that long is we were 12 years in Egypt.
Right.
And so we were living basically this third part. We spent a lot of time on the title to try to describe it, but
New Era, New Urgency, great title.
Yeah, what it's like for me to write the book. Do you ever see a road crew like on the turnpike?
Sure.
And I would wonder, like, boy, it has to be boring, like every 100 yards, yard by yard.
Right.
That's what it was like to write the book.
Right.
And so we really labored over how we would structure the whole thing. But ultimately, it was the story of purpose. We had to do the history. We had to do these corrupt shadows, to use the Jungian term, and then we had to talk about the illusions, and then Egypt.
So, guys, we're talking 6 to 8 decades of your expertise and experience in the academic world and educator world, right?
Yes.
Joe, sorry, we're out of time. Next time, okay, I promise we'll have you back. Joe, thanks so much today for joining us. You can search for New Era, New Urgency. Same goes for North Korea Deception, Hyde Park Deception, and Leningrad Deception. You can also peruse other fiction and non-fiction books at richardlyntonbooks.com. Great to see you. Be good. See you next time.